Mr. Guffey, I just want to begin with you and let you know that my heart goes out to you for you and your family's experience, and I really appreciate your willingness to be here today and to share your testimony.
Thank you.
I want to draw my colleagues' attention to the threat presented to minors by a relatively new consumer product, character-based AI chatbot apps. Many of these services have been flooded with age-inappropriate chatbots, which may cause young users to be exposed to sexual or suggestive AI-generated imagery or conversations. As a father of 3 school-aged children, this is personal. Further conversations with these chatbots can end tragically, as we've heard reports. Since 2023, at least 2 individuals have died by suicide following extensive conversations with AI chatbots. So the threat, colleagues, the risk is real. Mr. Guffey, how would you recommend that this committee begin to think about or think through the risk posed by this emerging consumer product category?
Whenever it comes to AI, I would have to lean more on some of the other panelists up here on their expertise when addressing chatbots. Chatbots is something new that I have just started really looking into, but on the legal side, I'm not an attorney. So I'm an angry parent that tries to throw it against the wall, whereas the attorneys are the ones who have to say, this is what will hold up in court, this is what will not.
Well, we've had to figure out the legalese, but I do think you have the most important voice here, given your experience. I mean, the chatbot piece is just the next iteration
Yes, sir.
of this technology. We know what technology was when you and I were much younger.
Everything.
What children have to contend with today, we can only imagine what's coming.
Well, and that's the exact problem. It's not just the problem. That's the problem of today, but it's as tech is evolving, our laws don't move fast enough to keep up with. And I believe that having that liability and being able to hold these companies responsible for what they are presenting, if we instead of taking online services and treating it as a service, if we can simply treat it as a product, then we can hold them to consumer protection laws.
Senator, if I may, I think we should think about the international context in which this is playing out, because the recent AI summit in Paris was called the AI Security Summit rather than the AI Safety Summit, which had taken place in the UK and I believe in Korea. And there's been a shift away from the prevailing thought that we must make these products safe. And instead, and particularly this administration, is urging the vast and quick expansion of these tools. And I think you have a role, and your colleagues have a role, to bring that focus back. And I dearly hope you do.
Ms. Goldberg, you seem anxious.
I do. One of my close friends, Matthew Bergman, is actually litigating a case against Character AI where the bot encouraged addictive behavior and ultimately led the child to die by suicide. And I think what we'll find is that there's a possibility that courts will perceive this speech as the corporation's own speech, and that in that case, Character AI is owned by Google, and that it won't overcome a Section 230 challenge.
Okay, very good point, actually. So what I would do, just in the interest of time, is invite all of you to respond to the same question after the hearing as part of our questions for the record, because I do want to get to at least one more topic, and I understand Senator Graham is on his way back as well. Last Congress, we had a hearing very similar to this, but instead of you 5 sitting in front of us testifying, it was actually the CEOs of the 5 largest social media companies testifying to the committee. And I had the opportunity then to ask them each about the parental tools that they offer, or didn't, but I think all of them have offered some sort of parental tool to help parents, help minors safely navigate the use of their respective services. I asked them to describe what those tools were, and more specifically, what the adoption and use rates of those tools were. Because you can have tools and protections out there, and you can debate whether it's sufficient or not, but if people aren't even utilizing them, then kind of what's the point? And sadly, they either didn't share how widely used these tools were, didn't provide the data, and they're all very big into data, or what data they did show demonstrated to us that the usage rates were actually very low. So the conclusion, unavoidable, undeniable, is that the industry isn't doing enough to let parents know what resources are available and aren't investing enough into understanding why these so-called protections aren't being adopted at greater rates. Mr. Balcom, in your testimony, you observed that these controls would better serve minors and their guardians if they were standardized, interoperable, and unified between apps, devices, and brands. How do you think we can make that a reality?
Well, I often use the example of the automobile industry. Back in the 50s and 60s, if you got out of one car and into another, you may not necessarily know where the blinkers are or the light switches were. Even the logos for those were different in different car makes. Well, laws came into place in the 60s, and in fact, now when you get into a new rental car, you know exactly where the indicators are, you know exactly where the lights are, and the symbols are all the same. Well, I'd like to see the industry come together, ideally voluntarily, but if not, perhaps with some coercion, to standardize the ways in which parental controls and online safety tools, which, by the way, are the ones that teens and young people use to stay private, to report, and to block, oftentimes without even their parents' knowledge. But in other words, let's have a standardized way of keeping our kids safe, and that teens can keep themselves safe, that is not as confusing as we got at the moment.
Yeah, industry standards. It's not a new concept, and it tends to happen one of two ways. It either gets imposed by some level of government, and then industry comes away kicking and screaming, or they can actually live up to their responsibility and come together as an industry and put forward a model that is transparent and that either works, or at least we can measure and hold them accountable when and where it doesn't. I know it's been a long morning for all of you. Very, very much appreciate your participation in today's hearing and the work that you do and the perspectives that you've offered. Tulsa Intergram is not coming after all, and so it falls upon me to not just thank all of our witnesses, but remind folks that the hearing record will remain open for 1 week for statements to be submitted into the record. Questions for the record may be submitted by senators by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, February 26th. Unless there's anything further from the nameplates.